Have you ever hit a point so low you thought you'd never come back from it? The kind of moment where everything fell apart and all you could do was breathe through the wreckage? What if I told you that moment wasn't your end, but your beginning? That rock bottom wasn't your curse, but the foundation you needed to build something unshakable? Good morning, everyone. We often fear failure. We avoid pain. We try to dodge disappointment like it's the plague. But what if I told you that the moment you hit rock bottom wasn't the end, but the beginning? The truth is, rock bottom was never your burial ground, it was your foundation. When you're at your lowest, you see things with a clarity that comfort can't offer. You learn who you really are, what truly matters, and how deep your strength runs. Rock bottom strips away everything you thought you needed, so you can rebuild with what you really do. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's lonely, but there's power in that place. Because once you've survived your worst days, you walk with a different kind of fire. You realize that if you can rise from that, you can rise from anything. So don't be ashamed of your rock bottom. Embrace it. Because it didn't break you. It built you. Thank you. Clarity in crisis, rock bottom removes distractions and reveals what truly matters. Self-discovery, it's in our lowest moments that we discover who we really are. Rebuilding with purpose, hitting bottom, gives us the chance to rebuild stronger and wiser. Unshakable resilience, surviving rock bottom creates a strength that fuels future growth. Rock bottom removes the noise. When everything you've known begins to collapse and the things you relied on no longer work, it forces a new kind of awareness. At that point, you stop focusing on the surface level distractions and start looking inward. You begin to ask real questions about your life, your values, and your direction. That clarity doesn't come when things are going well. It doesn't show up when you're comfortable. It only reveals itself when comfort is stripped away and you're left with nothing but the truth. In those quiet, raw moments, you see the difference between what you wanted and what you actually needed. When you hit that low, it's like a reset button gets pushed, everything slows down. You start noticing things you used to ignore, the people who check in on you, the thoughts that keep repeating in your head, the patterns you've been stuck in. You see clearly what wasn't serving you, what habits dragged you down, and what choices led you there. That kind of insight doesn't show up when life is easy. It shows up when you're down and can't distract yourself anymore. Suddenly, the things you once chased, approval, status, perfection, seem meaningless compared to peace, growth, and authenticity. This clarity also helps you realign. Maybe you were chasing a path that never belonged to you. Maybe you were living someone else's idea of success. When you're forced to pause at the bottom, you finally have time to separate your voice from the noise. What do you really want? Who do you want to be? Those answers often come from the most painful places because pain forces honesty. There's no pretending at rock bottom, only truth. You can't fix what you can't see, and that's what clarity in crisis gives you. Vision. It gives you a mirror showing you everything clearly, your flaws, your strengths, your choices, and your potential. And once you see things for what they are, you can start to build again. You can choose differently, think differently, and live with more intention. That level of insight is a gift, even if it comes wrapped in struggle. And it all begins when everything else falls away and you're left with only what matters most. It's in our lowest moments that we discover who we really are. When everything is going smoothly, it's easy to believe we know ourselves. We define ourselves by our accomplishments, our relationships, our routines. But when life falls apart, when we lose what we thought defined us, we're left standing face to face with our true selves. There's no performance in pain. There's no pretending when you're down. Struggle strips away the surface and shows you what's underneath. And often what's underneath is a version of you that's stronger, braver, and more capable than you ever realized. Hitting rock bottom forces you into the kind of self-confrontation that can't be avoided. You come to know your fears more intimately, but you also learn about your grit, your patience, your ability to endure. You meet the part of yourself that keeps going even when there's no applause, no recognition, and no clear way out. You learn that you don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You find out that even when you feel broken, you are still whole. And most importantly, you understand that your value doesn't disappear just because your circumstances changed. Pain has a way of waking you up. It shakes you out of autopilot and demands presence. Suddenly, you're paying attention to your emotions, your thoughts, your inner voice. And the more you pay attention, the more you realize how much of yourself you've ignored. Maybe you've always been strong, but you never had to prove it before. Maybe you've always had dreams, but fear kept you silent. Rock bottom brings those truths to the surface because there's nowhere left to hide them. And in that honesty, you start to reclaim pieces of yourself. The parts that were forgotten, dismissed, or buried under expectations. You wait. The parts that were waiting for you to remember who you are beyond the noise. That's the real self-discovery, not found in a book or a seminar, but in the quiet of your own pain, when you're stripped of the roles you play and the masks you wear. When everything external fades, the internal becomes clear. That's when you meet the real you. The one that survives, the one that heals, the one that keeps rising no matter how many times they fall. Hitting rock bottom gives you a rare and powerful opportunity, the chance to rebuild. But this time, you don't rebuild out of habit or pressure or other people's expectations. You rebuild with purpose. You begin to put the pieces back together, not the way they were before, but in a way that makes more sense for who you are now. After falling apart, you realize that not everything deserves to be put back where it was. Some things are meant to stay broken, so something better can take their place. That's the beauty of starting over. You get to choose differently. When you've lost it all or felt completely unmoored, you start to value things differently. You stop chasing what looks good and start searching for what feels right. You stop asking what will impress others and start asking what will fulfill you. That shift is subtle but life-changing. Instead of building a life that looks perfect from the outside, you start creating one that feels solid on the inside. You begin to choose relationships that nourish your soul, work that reflects your values, and habits that support your peace. Rebuilding with purpose means you're no longer just surviving, you're creating something meaningful. The process isn't quick or easy. It takes time. It takes mistakes. But this time, you're more intentional. You ask deeper questions and you make choices with a clearer sense of what matters. You don't rebuild because you're desperate to get back to normal. You rebuild because you've learned that the old and normal wasn't working. And maybe you never even questioned it until everything collapsed. But now, you can't unknow what you learned. You've seen what happens when life is built on shaky ground. So you become more careful, more honest, more focused. Every step becomes a deliberate act of healing and growth. This process also creates a stronger foundation than you had before. Because this time, it's rooted in truth. It's built with patience. It's held together by lessons you earned through pain. And that makes it unshakable. You're not rushing to cover up the cracks. You're learning from them. You're using them as guides for what to fix, what to leave behind, and what to build toward. And with each step forward, you become not only stronger, but more aligned with who you were always meant to be. There's a certain strength that only comes from surviving what you thought would break you. Rock bottom introduces you to a version of yourself you didn't know existed. The one who keeps going when there's no map, no guarantee, and no applause. That kind of resilience doesn't develop when things are easy. It's forged in the fire of disappointment, pain, and starting over. When you have nothing left to hold on to but the will to keep breathing, that's when you begin to build an inner strength that no outside force can shake. You learn to trust yourself in a different way. Before, maybe you depended on routines, people, or external validation. But once all of that falls away and you're still standing, bruised maybe, but still here, you realize that your strength isn't in what you have, but in who you are. Every tear, every late night, every small win during the hardest days teaches you that you are far more capable than you ever imagined. That kind of strength becomes a quiet force. It doesn't scream, it doesn't need recognition, it simply knows its own power. You begin to walk differently, not with arrogance, but with grounded confidence. You've seen your worst and made it through. So the little things don't rattle you like they used to. You don't panic over temporary setbacks because you've already survived the long nights when nothing made sense. That experience gives you a sense of calm, a kind of stability that others can feel when they're around you. You've become your own anchor, and no storm can carry you the same way it once did. What's even more powerful is that your resilience starts to ripple outward. You inspire others just by existing, by showing them it's possible to go through hell and come out softer, wiser, and stronger. You become proof that pain isn't the end. It's a turning point. And because you've been through it, you carry an empathy and depth that can't be faked. You know what it's like to be down, and you know what it takes to rise. So every time life tests you again, you don't fear the fall. You've already learned how to rise not just once, but again and again. And each time you rise stronger than before. So if you're standing at rock bottom or remembering the time you were, know this: it didn't break you, it built you. You've seen the worst, felt the weight, and still you're here. Not weaker, not lost, but wiser, stronger, more real. Because rock bottom wasn't your end, it was your beginning, your turning point. The foundation you needed to rise, not just once, but every time life dares to knock you down again.